What's up all you PC nerds, Jay here with JayzTwoCents bringing you not really a new part for Red Mist, but in fact I decided, you guys commented that you never get to see anything happening with the build, so I figured I'd go ahead and take the opportunity of having to install the replacement pump. If you recall, we had a bad pump in the previous part, I think it was part 5. Kind of lost track. This build seems to be just never ending. I figured we'd go ahead and show you guys the sexy rear end of Red Mist here. We'll take a look inside the bonnet, under the hood. So I don't know exactly how this video is going to turn out. It's not easy to record something while I'm doing something like this, so hopefully it doesn't entirely suck, and maybe you guys will learn something today. Now, if you guys watched the most recent Tech Talk, you'd know I kind of did a little tech segment that I'm going to try and do in every single video now, where I show you guys something actually happening hands-on to try and explain a concept that I get a lot of questions about. So you guys wanted to know, when I mentioned the pump was bad, you guys kind of wanted to know how a pump could go bad. And unfortunately, the pump that went bad in this build just happened to arrive bad. It wasn't anything I did, it wasn't anything that happened with the build. In fact, from the moment it was turned on, it was out of balance, and that was the problem. Now, I've mentioned before in water cooling videos that the worst thing that you could possibly do to this pump right here is run it dry. In fact, any water cooling pump, it doesn't matter, running it dry is the quickest way to kill it. You could kill it in a matter of seconds, depending on the RPM that the pump actually turns at. So this is actually a perfect opportunity to not just tell you why you can actually ruin your pump running it dry, but I can show you. So here's a D5 pump. We have the top on it already. That doesn't do us a whole lot of good because it's not a very good visual aid, considering you can't see inside it. However, I do have the bad pump right here, and I can kind of show you guys what I mean by what happens when you run a pump dry. Now, this is actually what a D5 pump looks like. It is nothing more than an electric motor and an impeller on here that spins around, pulls water in the middle, spits it out the outside. It goes out whatever the least path of resistance is, which will be the outlet, and water moves along its merry way. Now, unfortunately, these impellers, as you can see, are just floating on there. As you can see, this thing is kind of moving around on there, because what keeps the actual pump bearing from grinding on itself is that there's a layer of fluid that fills inside that gap. When there's no fluid in there, that bearing is rubbing around the outside. And if you guys watched on Tech Talk, you know when I took the new pump and just barely turned it like that, you heard some squeaking of metal because that pump is completely dry. This one still has a little bit of residue left in there, so it doesn't make that sound. So anyway, that fluid fills in the gap around the bearing and keeps it nice and protected from rubbing its shaft. Tech tip, guys, never miss a perfect opportunity to appropriately use the word shaft in a technology video while simultaneously making thousands everywhere giggle. So yeah, bad pump, that thing is out, and I actually got an opportunity to show you guys what happens when you run your pump dry, which is very, very bad. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna kind of install this pump in the bottom right here, get it plumbed up, and then that'll be it for just kind of a little bit of a build vloggy techie blog-a-thong. Long-a-thong-a-thong-a-dong. I guess it's now time to move in a little bit closer so you can actually see what it is I'm doing, because showing you something would make sense if you could actually see it. At least so I've heard. Now this installation is going to actually be really straightforward and pretty simple. You can see we've got the red loop here, which is our graphics card loop. It's all put together, plumbed up, bled, and it's good to go. That's one of the reasons why I like having dual loops when I can, is when I have to take something apart like I had to do here, as you can see, it allows me to be able to only deal with the parts that are affected rather than having to drain and bleed everything. It's going to be a whole lot easier to fill and re-bleed just one of these loops than it would be to do both with the graphics card and everything in there. Now that we've kind of got everything ready to go here, you can see I've got some holes drilled on the bottom for the pump mounting, and this is just the drain port right here, which will go on top, very similar to this pump. And then we've got the existing tube, which is going to actually attach right up in there, and that top fitting right there. So anyway, we'll just go ahead and get this bad boy threaded on here, and pretty much because we're dealing with palm material, which is a plastic, you don't want to go too tight. Hand tight is all you need, and there it is. So we can go ahead now and also get this top piece on, since it'll be a lot easier to spin this. Well, actually, we could do that with it already in there. That's not a problem. So make sure you get your collar on there for locking it down. You don't want to forget that. That'll make you have a bad day. I'm going to go ahead and get it on the fitting right here, which is actually, these are very tight fittings. Fittings. It's kind of a funny word. And same thing with the compression fittings. You pretty much just want to tighten them down as tight as you can get them by hand. There's no real need to tighten these up, you know, with a wrench or anything. They're going to get plenty tight of their own. They're not going anywhere. There we go. Now I have I don't know if you can really tell, you can see down here, here's under the desk. I have the PC pretty much spanning across the corner of the desk. That way I can get up under here, because if it was flat on the desk, I wouldn't be able to screw it in the bottom. So it's actually coming across the corner of both of my desks right there. So I basically am just gonna hand tighten the screws here until I get everything kind of in place, and then we'll just go ahead and crank it down. I mean, as you can see, this is actually a very fast install. So yeah, simple enough. We got it hand tightened. Now we're just gonna tighten down the screws, and the pump is actually, believe it or not, guys, almost completely installed. It's really easy to install a pump as long as you kind of know where everything's gonna go and you pre-plan. I think I've mentioned that about 50 times throughout this build log. Is proper planning is by far the most important component you can do in a build log, or just any build period. Proper planning. There's no replacement for it. Alright, so there's our pump. Nice and installed. It's not going anywhere. The top piece here, again, we just screw that sucker in. Now some people have kind of said that they felt that this was an ugly way of doing the bleed port. But you know, guys, it worked flawlessly when I needed to bleed this system once I realized that the pump was bad. So I had no complaints whatsoever about how this turned out. In fact, you don't even see it, so it doesn't really matter, if you ask me, how it looks. It's all about function over form in this area down here, because you don't even see it. In fact, I've got one of the tubes you can't even see going along the top of the radiator to make even more room there for the red loop. So this tube right here pretty much just runs up along to the upper rad, and this is the outlet, so it goes into that upper rad first, and then it goes into the rest of the loop from there. Simple enough. So there you go, guys. Just that easy, with a very awkward, very up close and personal look of my nose. You can see we now have both pumps installed. Took a matter of minutes with, like I said, proper planning. So the next thing to do now is going to be to fill it up and bleed it. And I guess since we're done installing this now, we might as well just go ahead and do that together. Now that we have the pump installed, the next thing we need to do is obviously fill it up, bleed it, drain it, or well, not drain it, obviously, we'd be back to square one. We need to fill it up and we need to bleed it and get it all nice and primed. I don't know if you guys heard that, but a cat just meowed. All YouTubers own cats. I don't know if you know that. That's the secret to success on YouTube, guys. You must own a cat. So for this build, we're going to be using, you guys already seen it, but I'm going to show you again. It is the Mayhem's Pastel White for this loop. It is a concentrate. We've actually used 3 bottles of this to get plenty of it. But there are some other white cooling options you guys asked about. So in the future, we are going to be taking a look at the Dragon Ice Fluid here from Dragon, and that's going to be in a separate video. Now there's actually a couple different ways you could fill a loop. In this one here, I chose not to do any actual fill ports and tubes coming off the top of the reservoir, because I don't really feel that's necessarily the cleanest look for this build. I have done it in the past, but all we're going to do basically on this loop is we're just going to turn the top, get the top off right here, and then we are going to just take a funnel and a piece of extra tube and kind of stick it in there like that. Make sure that it doesn't come out of the top. I've done that before. It makes a mess. It actually really sucks. Then we're going to fill it up as far as we can, turn on the pump, let it come down, stop the pump, and keep repeating that process until we get all of the system filled. Now, because we are using clear acrylic tubing or rigid tubing, it's going to be easy to tell when we've got all the major air pockets out because we can see through the tubing. But if you were using a solid piece of tube like you have here or like I have in my build over there with the black tubing, you can't see it too well. But in this case, it's going to be nice and easy. No pun intended, literally in this case, it will be really easy. So come on in, let's fill up this loop and let's get it nice and bled. Now I've got the first bit of reservoir nice and filled up with the nice white coolant. Now, one thing I forgot to mention of how I'm going to be turning the pump on and on, it's important that you don't actually start your system with it. I'm using a second power supply with a power supply jumper on there and a power supply that has a switch on the back so I can turn it on and off just to power the pump. So I want to make that part clear. Don't start up your system and run it with empty fluid like this because you're going to end up having some overheating problems. And if there happens to be a leak, you don't want your system powered on. So while I'm filming it right now, and I'm going to kind of speed up the video here to make this a little bit easier and more bearable to watch, you guys are going to notice that the fluid's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. And during that whole process, I've got tissue paper on the underside, kind of looking for leaks. I already know the front here doesn't leak. I'm just checking for leaks in the parts that I replaced in the part of making this video. So while making this video, make sure none of those fittings and none of those tubes are creating any sort of leaks down in the bottom. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing full of white blood cells. Well, there you go, guys. Red Mist is back up and running. A little bit of a delay, but I have to say overall the RMA process through Frozen CPU was as easy as could be. I mean, they watched the video that I made, they said, okay, here's the problem. They sent us out the part right away. And it took this long to get the video up because it really took me that long to get back to it. I've just got so much stuff going on. But as you can see, it is up and running behind me. Pumps work perfectly. It is perfectly bled and couldn't ask for an easier swap. And overall, like I said, customer service is what matters with me and companies. And I couldn't be happier with the way things went with Frozen CPU. Now, I know some of you are probably looking back there right now and going, wow, that is way too bright. I don't like that. Keep in mind, guys, the camera does not pick up the lighting the same as it does in real life. I mean, in order to make me not look like a shadow, the lights on the PC are being blown out by the camera. So I'll do a little bit of glamour footage here, hopefully so you guys can get a better representation of what the build looks like. But Red Mist is coming along nicely. Now, one thing I want to go ahead and mention is that some of you were very unhappy with the cable choice with this PC by just going with the plain black sleeved extensions. So I want to go ahead and just let you know right now that the awesome people over at Lutro Customs have reached out to us and offered us perfectly sleeved cables with an ROG theme that are going to match this build perfectly. So they're going to be red, white, and black cables, very similar to what's in my 900D for my build. So now we can say this build is perfectly top of the line with the best of the best, and I couldn't ask for a better project so far to be working on. I'm really excited about this project, but I just can't wait for it to be done. It takes up so much room, and I'm just tired of looking at it, guys. I'll be honest with you. I love Red Mist, but I want it to go to its rightful home, which is where it belongs with the guy who bought the computer. Yeah, guys, this is not my computer. Some of you guys seem to think that I've just made up this mythical, magical buyer who doesn't exist just to mask the fact that I've got this big bad boy for myself. But guys, the reality of it is, as you already know, that is my bad boy right there. Check it out. Yeah, so that thing is waiting to get worked on for me. Project Skunkworks. That's what I think we're gonna call it. Haven't really decided yet. So it's been JayzTwoCents part 5 1/4, we'll call it, because we had to do a little bit of repair on this thing. But as you can see, it's up and running. Beautiful computer, couldn't ask for more. Hopefully soon we'll get this thing finally fired up and get some benchmarks. because I know we're all dying to see what the numbers are, including myself. I'm gonna get on out of here, guys. Follow me on Twitter. I'd love to interact with you guys up there. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me with your tech questions. And as always, I will see you in my next video.